Hey, what's going on everyone? In this review we'll be looking at everyone's favorite crab-like MS, Char's MSM-07S Z'Gok. So is it Z'Gok or Z'Gok? Z'Gok? Anyways, I'll be reviewing this master grade model kit in 4 categories: the build, appearance, articulation, and gimmicks. I'll be giving each a score from 1 to 5, so at the end I can tally it all up for an average score. Hopefully I can help you decide if you should pick up this model kit. Alright, now let's get right into this build. Like a lot of my more recent reviews, this kit is really old, coming out way back in November of 2003. So you'd think this build would be dated, but actually because of how weird this Mobile Suit's design is, its age really isn't that noticeable. I mean, despite being over 15 years old, it has an almost full inner frame, and there's tons of molded in details to paint up its silver, gold, gunmetal, whatever you want really. There are also absolutely 0 screws holding this thing together, which is always appreciated on older kits. The build for the arms and legs specifically were really out there. See, they have this pull-out gimmick that leads to some really strange engineering involving double-sided ball joints and back-to-back polycaps. On top of that, despite being circular, these segments actually need to be lined up just right or they won't snap together. They're really deceptively difficult. They also feature black rubber piping running through them. It's kinda hard to make out against this dark gray plastic, but it's cool nonetheless. This black rubber is also found in the chest, ankles, hips, and feet to help with mobility. It's a really nice touch that I wish Bandai would have kept using. The only section of this build to legitimately give me issues are these chest vents. See, these vents are actually individual pieces that you pop in, which is annoying enough, but they also need to be put in just the right order and at just the right angle. It's a bit of a hassle. Moving on to the armor, you'll notice there are quite a few bad nubs on this kit. Nowhere near as many as the campfire I just reviewed, but still more than usual. They're worst on the legs, arms, and backpack. Thankfully, all these sections have inner frame poking through to help distract from them. The only piece on here that requires painting is the classic pink mono eye. You do get a sticker for it, but the eye section is a rounded piece, so you just know it's going to look terrible. Thankfully, this is a separate clear piece, so it's only a 2-minute job to paint up with a Gundam marker. I also added some black paint to a couple of the thicker panel lines, specifically on the side of the forearm, the top of the head, and the front of the legs. But really, none of that is mandatory to get this guy looking good. Alright, so the build for this kit, despite its age, was actually pretty solid. The weird engineering needed to make this suit work creates a really unique building experience. I really enjoyed it. I'll give this build a solid 4 out of 5. I'd say a beginner could build this guy pretty easily. They just need to really focus while building these segmented limbs. Okay, now let's look over his appearance. This is another one of those mobile suits that just hits you with its colors. I just love how bright this orange-red is. It really pops, even in comparison to other Char suits. I'm less a fan of the dark red used in the feet and forearms. It's just a little too dark for me. Still, it's close enough to the anime, so I can't really complain. Aside from that, the gray used in the armor and the light black for the limbs are really great. The proportions are just perfect. Really, I couldn't imagine a Z'Gok looking any better than this. There's no slimming up or modernizing here. He's exactly as fat as he should be, and it's just fantastic. This kit is just a gloss top coat away from being one of the best looking Zeon suits on your shelf. The only thing that gets me on this kit is the amount of nubs. They're mainly on the forearms, legs, and backpack, all of which are that dark red. So something tells me you can repaint all the dark red pieces with something a bit brighter, and you'd both hide all the nubs and get a color that pops more. Just something to think about. Like the Riga Z I reviewed a little while back, the panel lines in this kit are just right. You know how much I like anime accuracy, so I tend to go for a more minimalistic look, and this kit absolutely nails it. Yet there's still just enough tick marks to modernize it and keep it from looking too toyish. I really like the balance here. The stickers aren't anything too crazy. Of course you get a set of peel and stick caution signs, but also a small sheet of dry transfer model numbers and Zeon decals. Since this is a more anime accurate take, I didn't really apply any decals except for a few on the chest, just to add some character. The appearance of this kit is really solid. I mean, it looks about as good as this kit could look. However, the nubs kind of undercut it a bit. I'll give this kit's appearance a near perfect 4.5 out of 5. This actually ties it with the gun Canon as one of the best looking old school kits out there. Now let's see if his articulation can keep the high scores coming. Starting at the feet, well, they're just the usual old school bricks, so there's no movement at all. The top does tilt though, but funny enough it doesn't actually add any articulation. The ankles are on a single ball joint that is understandably hampered by the size of the foot and the ankle armor. The knee bend is fantastically bad. While you can bend it in any direction thanks to its unique segmented design, you only get about a 45-degree bend in total. You can, however, pull the legs apart for a better bend, but it doesn't really add too much. Fully extended, you get at most 90 degrees in total. Now, don't quote me on this, but supposedly the mass-produced version of this mobile suit uses slightly different engineering for these limbs. I don't know because I don't have that master grade, but I'm just throwing it out there. Anyway, most of the leg articulation is done from this hinge at the bottom, which gives you a solid 90-degree bend. The hips are just ball joints, so you get okay splits, but it's really all about these spins. The chest has two pretty solid ball joints. You can actually get some really great ab crunches here. However, the top part has a tendency to pop off. You also don't get much in terms of spins because of how rectangular the chest is. The shoulders feature the same ball joint as the hips, so you get decent lateral movement and some pretty great spins. The arms have the same segmented design as the legs, but they're even more restricted, getting like 15 degrees in total. You can still pull them apart, allowing for close to a 45-degree bend, but more often than not, the pieces will just pop out. It's a real pain to get the rubber tubing back into place and the segments all lined up right. Like the legs, all the articulation comes from this hinge on the forearm that allows for almost a 90-degree bend. Each claw is on an independent hinge, so they can close and open pretty well. Lastly, you can spin the mono eye, which is always appreciated on a Zeon kit. You pop off the red helmet and the inner frame and just spin it wherever you want. Well, despite how nimble this kit looks, it just sucks. It's a real shame, especially considering the possibilities presented in these segmented limbs. I have to give this articulation a below average, 2.5 out of 5. I guess you can pull off Char's GM kill pose, which is what most people are going to do with this kit, but still, you know? Lastly, let's take a look over these gimmicks. First up are his iconic claws called the iron nails. They come in this beautiful pure white, so they just look great. They can be a little finicky though, since they're made up of two separate components, a hinge and the claw itself. I recommend gluing these pieces together since they have a tendency to disconnect. The second major gimmick is the inclusion of swappable 4-pronged hands. So yeah, instead of having 3 claws, you can have 4 claws. You only get 2 extra claws though, which is pretty cheap in my opinion. Still, it's a really cool little touch and could be used with a custom paint job to really make this kit your own. And that's it. There's no other weapons or gimmicks here. At first I thought it was Bandai being cheap, but really, what else could they have added? I mean, the Z'Gok doesn't have any extra weapons, and there aren't a ton of related suits for part swapping. So yeah, I can't really fault them too much here. But on the other hand, they could have figured something out. Bandai could have given us a destroyed GM chest you could swap into the Master Grade GM, or maybe just some effect parts. Hell, even a beam saber bit that plugs into the gun inside the claw. Just something. Still, I don't think it's fair to knock them down too much for not being creative enough, you know? So I'll give the gimmicks a still solid 4 out of 5. High enough to show Bandai checked all the mandatory boxes, but still low enough to show that there's room for improvement. Okay, time to wrap this up for an average score. The build was a 4 out of 5. It's a really interesting build that seems almost timeless because of how unique it is. The appearance was a 4.5 out of 5. It's so close to perfect, but it's undercut by a few bad nubs. The articulation was a 2.5 out of 5. Despite how nimble this kit looks, you're lucky to get 90-degree bends. And the gimmicks received a 4 out of 5. I'm sure that's a controversial score, but I couldn't fault Bandai too much, yet they still could have figured something else to add. Tallying all that up, dividing, and of course rounding, this kit receives a 3.8 out of 5, but more accurately, it receives a 75%. In case you haven't seen any of my other reviews, this is actually a pretty high score for an old school Zeon kit. This Z'Gok was a really great build that looks fantastic under shelf, but that's really all you're getting. I wouldn't put this guy on my desk to mess around with like I would with the God Gundam or Arc 78 2.0, but he does look pretty great next to the other one-year war suits. While I'd love to see a 2.0 master grade with more modern articulation, I think this 2003 kit is still a solid buy as long as you're not too into posing. Alright, feel free to ask any questions you have about this kit in the comments, or to recommend more kits for me to review. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.